There's Sita.
Hi.
Hi. Ready?
It looks like the people are still coming in.
Okay, you can tell how many.
You see
people
it, see it,
are-
it keeps going up, yeah. Oh, I could go right here.
Got one more minute to start up. The more punctual we are, obviously, the more people expect that we're gonna start on time, so it's good. Sometimes there's technical difficulties, but
No technical. Okay, what close is it?
okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I want to call this meeting to order. This is our monthly El Dorado Hills Community Council meeting, this date, March 1st, 2021. And so having presented that, I would like to ask each of the leadership team members to identify yourself. And I'm just going to go down our leadership team listing here across the top of the agenda. So Mr. Bainey, would you start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, John Bainey, I'm the District 1 Planning Commissioner and also the head for infrastructure.
Thank you. Richard?
He's not muted.
Oh, hello, everybody.
Oh,
Hi,
there.
Richard.
I don't know if you heard. Maybe-
Can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Richard,
Oh, okay, Richard Ross, good governance,
thank you.
ready and willing.
All right. Chief Lowley's not here right now, so we'll kind of go past that. Glenn Krakow, excuse me? Okay, so please mute yourself if you're not talking actively at this point. Glenn Krakow informed me this evening that he's not going to be able to attend. He's in the process of transitioning to retirement and selling his business and doing various other things. So he's very busy this evening trying to make all that come together. So we'll look forward to Glenn joining us at our April meeting. Sita.
Hi there, I'm Sita Burgess. I'm a registered nurse and I am your panelist for Healthy Communities.
Thank you. John Davey.
Hello, I'm John Davey. I'm the chair of the El Dorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee, and we're a resident group that focuses on studying proposed development projects in El Dorado Hills and providing feedback from the community to the planning process, the planning commission, the board of supervisors, and developers.
Very good. And then Tim White, please introduce yourself and your association.
Vice Chair of APAC, doing everything John just said.
Okay. And then Cindy.
I'm Cindy Munt, Supervisor Heidal's assistant, and I do community information and outreach for the community council.
Very good. With that introduction, I just want to identify anyone who is not a member of the leadership team here, but is a volunteer for the District 1 commissions and commissioners. So
Good.
Cindy.
We've got Alan Stansberry.
Okay, Alan, would you please introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, I'm Alan Stansberry. I'm chair of the Human Rights Commission for the County of El Dorado.
Thank you.
We've got Tita.
Tita. I'll just tell you that Tita serves on our Commission on Aging, so she's been a longstanding active member on the Commission on Aging. So who's next?
Let's see. Down the list here. The others. Wendy May.
Wendy May, please.
Yeah, okay. That's who that works.
Here to help anybody I can. I'm a director of the County Assessor Appeals Board, so just here
Thank
to
you,
help.
Renee. We're pretty much covered.
I think so. I don't know about those phone numbers, so.
All right, so let's go on to item 2, adoption of the regular meeting agenda. Does anyone on the leadership team have a recommendation for any changes on tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none, we're going to accept the agenda as published. We'll move on to item 3, public comment. This is the period in the meeting we would like to invite anyone who would like to make a comment, ask a question of the community council leadership team on a subject matter that's not on tonight's agenda already. So if you want to talk to something that's on the agenda, we'll get to that. But for anything that's not on the agenda, you'd like to make the leadership team aware of something in the community or whatever, now would be the time to express that. So Cindy, with that, could you tell people how to open up the phone lines?
Yes, if you're joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment, and we will call you by your last 3 digits of your phone number. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button, and we will tell you when it's your turn. It looks like we have Joel Wiley.
Go ahead, Joel.
Let me see. Do I have to?
He lowers hand.
His hand's still up.
Okay.
See if you can get in there. No. There he is.
There I am.
There you are.
There you go.
I just wanted to thank Chief Lilienthal for all of his work in organizing the vaccination clinic up at Station 86 this Saturday. It went
Great.
off without a hitch.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. I know Cena participated in it, I think, all day, so she can give you a report when we get to the healthy communities part about her experience in that. But everything I heard was just, raving success again. Everybody was very pleased with the process. Went very, very well. So yes.
And thank you, Joel. Joel volunteered as well. He was there.
Okay, very good. So Joel's one of the volunteers.
I
Excellent.
was out letting people out.
Well, that's an important part. They get to go home, right? Okay.
Being
any
healthy and
other,
safe.
Any other public comment we have?
I
I'm not
don't,
seeing
I
any
don't
unless
see
you are
anything. No, I don't see anything.
Okay, well, we can always take some public comment towards the end of the meeting when we get to commissioner items if need be. So let's move on to item 4. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for the evening, Lieutenant Rick Hatfield, who's our new commander, relatively new commander of the Placerville CHP office. And I've asked him to share with us some of his roles. Obviously, he has certain mandates. He has to comply with things, but he does have a certain amount of flexibility to be creative with stuff. And in particular with that, then how his knowledge of events going on, the problem areas, I'll call it, in El Dorado Hills, including maybe heaven, since Rick lives in the city of Folsom, so he's nearby and he has familiarity, obviously, with our community in El Dorado Hills. So with that, Rick, please take over.
Well, thanks for that that welcome, guys. I really look forward to meeting each one of you in person sometime soon once we get back to normal, although lately these Zoom meetings are have become normal for us. I appreciate the opportunity to, one, welcome myself and kind of highlight and showcase a little bit about what the CHP does for the community. Oftentimes, especially with, I've got a list of things I want to talk about, and I'll get to the parking issues, but I also want to talk about, such things as speed enforcement, speed limits, how we set speed limits. And I mean, we don't, the CHP, we're responsible for enforcement, but oftentimes we get grouped in and lumped in, and I understand because it can be confusing. Even though it's in our wheelhouse and it's our world, sometimes it's confusing for us too, because there's a legislative portion, there's a county involvement, there's sometimes Caltrans involvement, local city roads, traffic engineers, et cetera. And there's different advocacy groups as well as pedestrian rights, pedestrian groups, bicyclist groups. Often these folks have competing interests that all need to, they have a safe stake, and they're also a stakeholder in traffic safety amongst the traveling public. So since we are focused, the majority of our group is focused on the El Dorado Hills community, which is within our Placerville area. Just a quick overview of who we are at the Placerville area. We cover a huge area. So we go from the El Dorado County line all the way east up to Twin Bridges. So we actually cover a majority of the slope more than South Lake Tahoe office does. We go to the south, we go to almost to Amador County. And to the north, we cover almost to Cool, the Confluence, the Rubicon area. So we have a vast area, Whitmore Springs, Highway 49 near the quarry, Mount Ockham. We have a large area, Diamond Springs, etc. And staffing continues, like a lot of other entities, public and private. Right now, staffing is a big issue for us. We only have one academy statewide, and it's in West Sacramento here. We're fortunate that it's nearby, but lately due to COVID, our academy has been closed down, and our academy drives the bus. Without that bottom layer of the pyramid, that's how we continue to replace attrition. We're losing folks left and right. This is a dynamic, dangerous profession. So we have a hard time with recruitment and retention, et cetera. And so the way staffing affects you citizens is because it sometimes limits our resources. We have a lot of competing interests with, say, for example, Caltrans, our homeless issued right now, the population where we're having to, loan or focus a lot of our attention on non-traditional CHP mission efforts. It becomes taxing on our overall resources. So I just wanted to paint that picture a little bit, just kind of understand what sort of resources and what we have available to us right now. El Dorado Hills, the community itself, as you know, is growing like crazy. It's our most dense populous area within our jurisdiction, is right here in the community. So I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about speed limits. So as I mentioned earlier, we're the primary traffic law enforcement agency in this county with regards to traffic enforcement. We have an existing memorandum of understanding with the El Dorado County Sheriff. So to simplify things, we handle most things traffic related: crashes, speeding, dangerous driving, DUI enforcement, et cetera. Or the county sheriffs take care of general crimes. So if your house gets broken into, or if there's an assault, there's a fight at a bar or local establishment, the sheriffs take care of that. We work hand in hand, we assist each other, but ultimately at the end of the day, jurisdictionally, who's responsible for what, that's sort of some basic guide rules of how we operate business. So I'm going to talk about speed limits first. So speed limits within California are established, and you'll hear this term thrown around fairly regularly and commonly, and sometimes loosely, as the 85th percentile. And that's where it gets sort of dicey. So I'm going to do my best to speak in layman's terms. And it's free. Anybody jump in at any time. I think this is going to go a lot better if you can stop anytime and ask me any questions to clarify things or slow down or maybe repeat anything. So the 85th percentile can be best described as the speed at which 85% of all vehicles are observed to travel under free-flowing conditions past a monitored point. So essentially, a traffic engineer, or on the highway, for example, Caltrans will actually run radar, for example, under a set amount of time. So say, let's make it for easy math, a 1 hour period at different times throughout the day, because there's different volumes, traffic volumes. And then they count the number of vehicles, and then they plot the speeds that they're measured at. And of those, they determine an 85th percentile. Now, the emphasis and the sort of the understanding of the philosophy of the 85th percentile is that it defines a speed that 85% of the drivers will drive at or below under free flowing conditions, because most people don't drive according to the posted speed limit, believe it or not, but they account for visual aspects of the road and more of a feel for the road, if that makes sense. And those visual factors that influence the speeds can include lane and shoulder configurations, or the width of the lane, presence of a vertical or horizontal curve, or just sight distance and obstructions, or even the presence of the surrounding developments, the roadway, school zones, obstructed corners, intersections, pedestrians, bicycle traffic, etc. So those surveys are what when we enforce certain sections of roadways that have posted speed limits, we rely upon those surveys in court, because ultimately, those have been made available to the public. They're conducted by a third party, uninterested party, unbiased party, and they're supported by data, factual data of roadway configurations, the engineering of the roadway, surrounding businesses, cross traffic, et cetera. And so therefore, that's how the posted speed limit becomes defined or determined. Therefore, when it comes to enforcement, we rely upon those because they're substantiated, and we can actually use those in a court of law to determine that driver X was traveling above posted speed X. Now, there's a basic speed law which applies where that's up to the officer's discretion. So on roadways where, say for example, a posted roadway was at 30 miles an hour and a driver was traveling at 35, but the visibility was obstructed, it was a rainy day, the roadway was wet, etc., then the actual posted speed wouldn't really even be applicable. It'd be up to that individual officer if they determined to take enforcement action. He or she would have to define or prove later in the court of law on how they came up with that determination based on their discretion, experience, observations, etc. Any questions so far on engineering traffic survey? Well, those are done, by the way, by different. So, for example, in El Dorado County, we have just got the gentleman's name earlier. The engineering traffic surveys are done by the El Dorado County Department of Transportation, and ultimately they're signed by senior engineering technician. So we rely upon those surveys to enforce the speed limits within El Dorado County.
I have a quick question. I'm Sita Burgess. Hi.
Hi, Sita.
Hey, so do you guys ever use that 85th percentile kind of study or surveys to determine if areas are more problematic than others where you might need more resources, or is that just a way to kind of come up with speed limits and zones?
So we, as the department, CHP, do not weigh in at all on the engineering traffic surveys. Those are done independent through the county. But oftentimes we're there as a resource. And so if certain communities, say, for example, are proposing to lower or increase the speed limit, then they can oftentimes rely upon us to provide collision data or enforcement data or calls for service in a certain area. That's happened pretty frequently, where certain counties or engineers are looking to lower one and they need more support or substantiation data, et cetera, to hope to prove their case.
Would that be similar? You're saying, so maybe if someone wants to bring down a speed limit, would that be similar data that you would look at if you wanted to put in like a stop sign somewhere, or maybe a no parking zone or something? Or is that the kind of data you guys look at?
Potentially, those are potential ways to mitigate speed or aggressive driving, is undulations or just more traffic control devices in general. So traffic control devices can include pavement markings, street signs, stoplights, stop signs, etc., advisory signs. Those are all traffic control devices. Any more questions so far? So by relying on the rationale or the premise of the 85th percentile, I think it's been proven through studies that in general, most people accept, understand, and follow these concepts. But as mentioned earlier, when confronted by local traffic challenges, an increase in traffic volumes or the frequency or severity of car crashes in a particular area, for example, people often reject these concepts and rely instead upon a number of widely held misconceptions, such as, I hear this a lot, lowering a speed limit will reduce traffic speeds, or raising a posted speed limit will increase traffic speeds. Lowering speed limits will reduce the rate of crashes and increase safety, or any posted speed limit is safer than an unposted speed limit, when in fact, oftentimes these studies prove just the opposite. Which is why most entities rely upon that 85th percentile rationales, because despite a posted speed limit, the driver most commonly will drive based upon the feel or his or her comfort level within the roadway. And that can become with familiarity or just the comfort level in general. And so oftentimes when these arbitrary speed limits pop up, we see just the opposite, because people dismiss these speed limits because they're in their opinion, they're absurd or they're way too low, et cetera. That's often the case, is because they're usually way too low. So we normally would suggest that that entities such as the county or the state implement more different sources of ways to mitigate these speeds. Visual presence, we encourage folks to call our non-enforcement line for traffic complaints, et cetera. We'll do our best to saturate the area through grant funding, et cetera, just to sort of, because oftentimes when we do that, there's usually a ripple effect. And so we don't often notice things the day or two, but people in communities, and we see it, it's general human nature that we just talk. So we talk amongst our social circles, we talk at work, where, hey, do you guys see CHP's been out on this street or this road, or they're near this intersection? And then from there, we just sort of move around, and then ultimately with the goal of it being that this ripple effect just occurs and that people are more aware. And oftentimes it's just our presence that sometimes can be more of a deterrent. We work with different counties and different private entities as well, as far as speed limits. And it's usually, they're usually come away very educated, because it's, like I said, it's a complex topic, even in our wheelhouse. And I'm just giving you guys, things from like sort of a 30,000 foot view, but it gets a lot more complex with that, with radar and LiDAR enforcement and et cetera. So I don't want to go too deep at this juncture.
Question?
Sure.
Vander, question?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
The 85 percentile, that deals with areas that do not have pre-established speed limits, like residential districts or school zones and things of that nature, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, you can look in the vehicle code. It clearly outlines exactly where an ETS is an engineering traffic survey, where they're required or where they're not. It's section 40801 of the vehicle code. But you're right, school zones are exempt from that. And oftentimes residential areas, cities have the authorities, and so do counties, and traffic agencies and departments have the authorities to arbitrarily designate those roadways, such as school zones or dense residential areas or dense business commercial areas, to drop into a 25-mile-an-hour limit. There's several different factors that go into these surveys. I mentioned collision history, pedestrian bicycle traffic, the amount of traffic typically on the street, with the amount of development we see in El Dorado Hills. That's typically the issues that come up, is that people want to reevaluate these speed limits because of development. Roadway characteristics, curves, curbside parking, and just cross traffic, et cetera. Any more questions about speed limits? Have I done a decent job of covering how they're determined, who's responsible for them, how enforcement comes into play, et cetera?
So let's take questions or comments from our panelists first, and then we'll open it up to the public at this time, since this seems like a reasonable separation of the kind of the Q&A period. So panelists, does anybody have any comments or questions at this point for Commander Hatfield?
I'll start it off again. The Academy obviously is not producing new recruits. What is your authorized staffing level, and how much below that are you?
So I'm allocated here at the Placerville area. We are allocated for 42 officers and sergeants. So we have 4 sergeants, and the remainder are all officer allocations. Now, the way that the state works is that if once a person separates, be it resignation or retirement, we're not allowed to fill that vacancy right away. So that person, they may have leave credits on the books, so they have to exhaust those prior to that being refilled. So we have a few of those. I think we have 4 on our books right now. And so we're operating at about 37 officers right now. And we also, we always have ongoing injuries, et cetera. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a difficult job. We wear a lot of gear. We wear a vest and a belt, chase people, and people get injured. So right now I have a few officers that are working on limited duty as well. So as I mentioned earlier, when I outlined the area and our jurisdictional responsibility, we have a big area. We have a lot of other local communities that are that need attention as well, that are once you get off the 50, go either north or south. Those little communities there, although they don't have the same amount of volume of traffic, they still have their needs as well, that we do our best to sort of, as thin as we get spread, that's up to me to try to determine how I'm going to reallocate my beat resources. Now, the majority of our folks are flowing down Highway 50. That's our major corridor right now. So I can't ignore that because that's where the high speeds are and just the amount of volume strictly. So we're thin right now for sure. But our academy is starting back up. We're not able to run classes concurrently like we normally are. We have to do one at a time. There's one cadet to each room. So they're due to graduate in July, and we're hoping to graduate about 150 cadets. But as you probably know, the majority of those will go to our major urban areas, such as Los Angeles, San Diego, and of course the Bay Area.
So Rick, one of the comments I hear from a lot of people relative to 85th percentile and posted speed limits is the difficulty in having proper sight distance from a given intersection, that you may not have a half a mile of sight distance. And obviously, if you can only see 300 yards up the road and cars are traveling 50% greater than the posted speed limit, when you try to merge into traffic, you immediately find that somebody's on your back side trying to push you along. Maybe they're braking hard, they're complaining and stuff, but they're traveling way over the posted speed limit. And yet, the driver who legitimately tried to enter the roadway with the proper distance is now the person who's at fault, so to speak, for impeding the flow of traffic. And it just makes no sense to us old timers, old school people, that there shouldn't be some way to make sure that whatever sight distance is present at a given intersection, that those speeds have to be consistent with that. Because that's one of the things the county always plans on at a given intersection is, what is that sight distance? What is it safe or not? Do we need to do something to perhaps provide more sight distance by carving into the hillside during construction? All those kinds of things. So it's the dynamics of faster speeds because we have safer automobiles and people feel like they can drive faster. A lot of those long-standing rules just kind of fall apart from the standpoint of safety. The key comment I typically get is from parents who have new young drivers. Your high school kid who just turned 16 or 17 and they're out there trying to merge with traffic and do all these things. And they don't necessarily recognize how fast that car is really coming compared to what the posted speed limit is. So those are the difficulties in terms of how you make all this work and maintain a safe environment. So do you have any thoughts on that relative to sight distance at existing intersections?
I agree with you. I could see that. I could see the challenges. However, I think that question is probably best suited for engineering because ultimately they're the ones who are responsible for, again, the markings, the signage, and the limits themselves. I think that after reading these surveys, I know that they take that into account. But your specific scenario is probably best suited for an engineer to try to determine why that speed is the way it is, the limit that is.
Okay, and then obviously the enforcement, the expectation will be enforcement to the posted speed limit, and that's the bigger challenge, right? Because you can't be everywhere all the time. And as soon as people realize they can get away with speeding 95% of the time or 99% of the time, it becomes the standard of what they do as opposed to the more common sense safety provision. So
sometimes, yeah, that's one of the challenges. You're right, we can't be everywhere. There's a lot of other suggestions being thrown around the state with different methods of enforcement, automated, et cetera. There's some challenges with that as well, too. Identifying driver, not stopping the action as it occurs. So in other states you may be familiar with, such as Arizona, where they have automated speed enforcement, you'll get a ticket and the driver may get a ticket. Actually, not even the registered owner of the vehicle will get a ticket in the mail a month later, but it doesn't stop the vehicle from traveling 90 miles an hour at the time. Therefore, the threat or the danger is still occurring. Those are some of the challenges with automated speed enforcement. And then there's some other opinions where it's strictly revenue generating. We as a department rest on our laurels of education and, like I mentioned, other visual presence. We would hope that folks would follow the law, drive courteously. So we rely way more on presence and versus automated enforcement. We like the traditional methods.
okay, other panelists, comments or questions before we open to the public? Anybody?
Yeah, Lieutenant. I know next door always posts traffic issues, speeding, people blowing through stoplights, etc. Now, I believe the CHP can ticket in two circumstances. One, if an officer observes it, or two, if there's a stoplight and there's a camera and you see someone go through the stoplight and are caught on camera. A lot of people next door complain that they see people speeding. They might even get a license number, a plate number, and they don't know what to do about it. I believe I've understood from previous conversations with your department that if people call the non-enforcement line, they can tell you what they saw. They can describe the car and the license plate, and that you guys have the ability to follow up with a phone call or a visit with the registered owner. Sort of, you can't give them a ticket, but you can say, hey, you've been observed maybe more than once. Is that the correct procedure to follow if you guys don't see it?
So yes, it is. And I'll agree with you that, yes, you're right. An officer needs to observe the violation. The only form of automated enforcement right now in California, the only thing that's legislatively supported is the red light camera. And even those, the footage itself needs to be observed by an officer. There's one officer who's actually, that's all he or she does in the Sacramento region downtown, where they just strictly observe the footage from the cameras and issue the citations. So we can't see the next door posts. I hear about them as well, but we do encourage you to call the non-emergency number or the number here at the office, and we will send out a letter. The letter is somewhat vague. It obviously won't provide or disclose any confidential information. However, it will say that this particular person, a vehicle registered to you or at your address, was observed at this location at this date and time doing X. And then we include our phone number and at least one staff member's name here at the office. So in case that individual, a parent, et cetera, wants to call up and have a follow-up conversation, we could go into more detail. And so oftentimes, believe it or not, those are actually very effective. Most folks are very receptive when they get those, especially parents of teen drivers. So yeah, we encourage those. We'll gladly send out those letters.
Thank you.
Can you share, is the non-emergent line the best one to call? Is that the 916 number?
Well, it's for anybody, yeah, the non-emergency to our dispatch is 916-861-1300.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then would that be the right number to call in that regard if you were taking down a license plate okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I think let's open it up to the public if we don't have any more panelists, comments, or questions. And this is just the first segment, basically on speed controls and other things. We'll talk about other activities the CHP has, but Cindy, do you see anybody in the public that's got their hand raised?
Joel.
Hi, this is Joel. I'm in El Dorado Hills. Harking back to something that showed up on Next Door Neighbor. A number of vehicles with extremely loud exhaust were observed, and I suggested that they call the non-emergency number and was told, well, the CHP isn't going to do anything. I tried to get a hold of Officer Brown, but I couldn't find either a phone number or an email address on the website, so I sort of let it go by. What can you do about illegally loud vehicles?
You took the correct course. I'm not sure, I didn't catch the first part of that, who told you that information, but what you did was exactly proper, and we encourage you to continue to do the same. That is our jurisdiction. That is our responsibility. Officer Brown's actually with me here in the call. Very attentive to the continuing complaints, especially around Serrano Parkway, Silva Valley, et cetera. We're aware of larger groups that are continuing to congregate, some that are abiding by the law and just simply showing off their cars, which is great and what we encourage. I think it's great for young kids to be out there, especially car enthusiasts. It's like a younger version of Cars and Coffee, that the old guys do. But then there's some other folks that take it to a different level. So I guess hopefully that answers your question. What you did was completely appropriate. That's our wheelhouse. It's 100% our responsibility and our jurisdiction, and we want to know about it.
Message us on Facebook too.
Thank you.
And Andrew just mentioned, for those who aren't aware, we have an incredible social media presence that's monitored by Andrew and myself, both on Facebook and Instagram. That's sort of becoming the more effective and up-to-date, quick method of sending messages, etc. So I can gladly share that information for those who don't have our Facebook and Instagram pages. But Andrew and myself both monitor those.
Some of us who are aged beyond perfection don't do Facebook.
I understand.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any other public comments or questions relative to traffic controls? Speeding, etc. Loud noise. You see anything?
Oh,
Cindy?
wait, Smith. Okay, how about Robin?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to ask what the Facebook and Instagrams are for the CHP.
Okay, our Facebook is CHP hyphen Placerville.
Okay,
And our Instagram is CHP _ Placerville.
thank you.
Of course.
The others you see, Cindy?
Smith. Okay. He's unmuted.
Okay, hello?
Oh, there's-
Oh, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. So we've lived in El Dorado Hills for almost 30 years and have seen lots and lots of changes. We're up over off of Francisco, up by Lake Forest and Marina schools. So I know this 85 rule doesn't apply to the school districts or the school areas, but the stop signs are constantly run. There's constant speeding. Double yellow lines are not observed. There's constantly U-turns. The newer generation that's moved into this area now has a whole following of, what are they called? Golf carts that are unlicensed, no seatbelts, no headlights. We've called CHP several times. They'll send out the, not the CHP officers, but the volunteers who can't ticket anybody. We've talked to the principal about it. He won't put anything in newsletters that, you need to not do this. It's just so frustrating. I can't even leave my house right now with COVID. It's a little bit better, but I can't even get out of my court when it's school time coming in or going out because of the way these people drive up here. It's unsafe.
Okay, Ms. Smith, I would love to have a sidebar conversation and get some specifics and some details.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to have some dates and traffic patterns, certain times of the days, et cetera.
Oh, when school's in and when school's out.
Okay. Well, keep in mind, you're correct about the 85th percentile not applying to school zones. However, the signage issue is a complete separate issue. Stop signs are stop signs and they're a complete different violation. So it's important to distinguish the two. And then golf carts, we're dealing with golf carts right now with Serrano, and that's probably a better time for a different topic too. But they, on those roadways, I am familiar with their location. So those are illegal. And so if we could potentially have a different conversation, I'd love to go over, get some details and specifics about what you're observing.
Okay, you want me to just send you a message through Facebook or Instagram?
Yeah, I think that would be best. Either one of those would work.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.
Else?
No.
Okay, so Commander Heffa, please kind of finalize your presentation, whatever it is you want to discuss. I know we didn't necessarily talk about heaven per se, but there's a number of different issues up there. It's not only parking, it's speeding on Ridgeview and other things. So in total, there's a number of different things that have crept up in terms of what I'll call bad behaviors that are exhibited up there. And it's not unlike several other parts of the community. It just seems to be a concentrated area for that type of activity. So any more thoughts or any ideas you have on any of those other areas?
No, I did have quite a few, bullets. I was hoping to sort of maybe be able to field some questions specific to Heaven or Calithia.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's
I've
yeah,
got some.
yeah, I bet you do.
She's got them if you're ready for them.
I do.
So we can certainly jump right into there. Yeah, I just want to say that we're continuing to work with the county on parking. As I mentioned earlier, we any sort of enforcement action that we take, if it's a parking ticket, if it's a verbal warning, if it's a citation, etc., it has to be supported legislatively. And it could be even to be a civil violation. We continue to write parking tickets statewide, but there has to be some sort of law or a county ordinance to support them. We're aware of the issues. I think we're going to continue to work with those stakeholders to where we can, form a solution. I think a lot of that's going to be just through our presence to deter the behavior that's happening. But I do, like I mentioned earlier, it's really important that for the listeners out there to understand what the correct course is, who's the right person to call, whose responsibility this is, because oftentimes I think a lot of the fingers get pointed in different directions and there's just some misinformation out there. And so that's sort of my goal today, is to talk about exactly what we're responsible for and how much teeth we have. And when I say that is that as an agency, we can't just arbitrarily decide who and what violations to take action on. They're not legislatively supported by a court. If there's nothing supporting that, we can't just use our discretion or arbitrarily choose to focus on them. Oftentimes those ordinances come from either the state or, in this case, the county. So once the county determines what the most appropriate course, and I know it could be expensive, it involves staffing, it involves processing. What do we do with these citations? Who's going to handle them, etc. We'll gladly be there at the table and talk about the enforcement aspect. But until we have action on, I think it's sort of we're not quite there yet, but we're continuing to work with these groups to come toward a solution. But Sita, I'll gladly take a stab at any of your questions thus far.
Okay, good. Okay, a couple, because this comes up, you talk about stakeholders, and we started some stakeholder meetings last summer, and they were actually very fruitful. We got a lot out of that. We learned more. I was at the traffic advisory committee, and Officer Brown was there. That was, we learned a lot from that too. It was very helpful. So as you know, Beatty Drive is the roadway along what we call Heavens, an undeveloped property. Now, a portion of Beatty Drive is privately owned. It's just that we got stuck in that development piece. So technically it's privately owned. Is the CHP, do you have jurisdiction to cite on that private portion for illegal, like double parking or speeding or DUI or anything that's on that private part of the road?
So primarily no. DUI, yes. A hit and run involving injury, some form of reckless driving. We have very limited jurisdiction on private property. So parking, no. Most infraction vehicle codes, no.
Okay, but DUI, because it's more of a state that's applicable anywhere, because it's illegal behavior inside the car, could cause harm to others.
Yeah, I don't know all the legislative history with it, but I can only, surmise that because it applies anywhere in the state. It could apply, I'm not exaggerating, in your backyard on a riding lawnmower. Believe it or not, meets the criteria. Any vehicle operated by motor power, etc., would apply. So yeah, DUI for sure, just because of the severity and the danger involved on the elements of the crime.
So our fire department was working with this private landowner who owns that private section or portion, and they were discussing, they did measurements of the width and discussed that they could make that a fire zone. So that would be putting up the different things they're thinking about, putting up some type of like a red curb or something, some kind of way to along the roadway, it's very narrow, which is really the reason. It's very, very narrow. And what people are doing is they're parking on his private property, like beyond the road. So it'd be a way to kind of keep them so they'd have to park in the street. So the question would be, if that was a road, fire road, would that be enforceable even though it's private?
So if it was determined by the county and the fire department that met the criteria for a fire lane, yes.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would still continue. It'd still be trespassing. So it's important not to overlook that. So it's still a crime.
Well, then we could hit him for 2 then. I'm just saying. No, I mean, I'm just kind of curious though. It also, we want to be cautious with the idea of the enforcement issues and staffing and things you're talking about. You know, is there staffing here enough that could manage that? Or, I mean, so we were just a few minutes ago, you're mentioning that with like, let's say Beatty or Heaven, for example. Would that impact your department right now if for example, that was to become a fire zone? Spring and summers when it really gets bad, we already have people out there trespassing. They are vandalizing the fencing, ripping it apart. The landowners have had to fix the fencing many times this winter already. And if that's a sign of things to come, it's going to be an ugly spring and summer. And the issue isn't just all along Beatty, but what happens is this is becoming a real popular area. So the crime is going up. We had a big fire. We had bullets go into someone's house, and it's moving out. The tentacles of it, the tentacles of that area are spreading into other vacant lots throughout the communities, of the surrounding neighborhoods, causing trespassing into parks at night and private properties and things. So is there sometimes, I guess it's a double question, but is how your staffing would, if you happen enough to, if it were to be a fire zone, is it realistic we get some enforcement? And then are there public safety thoughts, concerns that could lead to another staffing of someone there to add some of the area?
So yeah, to answer your question, and it's sort of a multifaceted different answer, but I guess earlier I hope I didn't paint the wrong picture when I was describing our staffing. Our department's still going to continue to handle business as usual, despite the numbers that I shared with you, et cetera, and because of our current situation with staffing. So please don't take that as a deterrent to please continue to call. I mentioned the trespassing only because that's a crime now. The scenario you're posing is that if these ultimately do meet the criteria for a red lane or a fire lane, then of course we'll enforce it. And I don't want you to ever think about our resources as being an issue, because it shouldn't be. We'll continue to handle business. We're aware of all the history that you just described, the fires, et cetera, the crimes, the fences, the bullets, et cetera. So we'll continue to roll out there and provide a visual presence and have an aggressive enforcement. That's why we need those calls to continue to come in, reach out to your constituents. I meet regularly. I met with Mr. Heidel last month, and I'm also going to meet with Ms. Thomas in the middle of this month. So continue to have those conversations, because I've got a boss too, and so ultimately, so that's oftentimes that's how those resources and staffing questions come up, and what I can do to sort of improve my picture is because of the calls for services, et cetera. So continue to call, of course.
That private portion of Beatty, then, could that landowner theoretically put up his own signs, no parking, along his private portion?
Well, I can't stop or encourage anyone else from putting any signs. However, the issue still comes down to it being supported. Right. And so in order for us to take enforcement action, I wouldn't allow any of my folks taking it because we could. We don't have that authority to. So I'm not suggesting that it wouldn't work as a deterrent. I can just tell you that we wouldn't be able to enforce.
There's no legislation. Got it. And then I just have two more. The current red curb, I was at the traffic advisory committee. We discussed the current red curb that's down on Beatty on the public portion, and it's not currently enforceable. So the sheriff department was telling me that they were actually citing some people on that, the current red curb down there on Beatty, saying they're like, well, it's a red curb. So, I was just curious about that. What would it take to make that enforceable?
The red curb.
Yeah, that's already there, yeah.
Oh, well, it would have to be a designated red curb through the fire district of El Dorado Hills. And once we're made aware of those, they're made aware to the public. Once we're aware that it is a legitimate violation, then it would be supported, if that makes
I
sense.
think the DOT painted it red. It was part of this traffic advisory committee, or the CHP. I don't know that the fire department did. This is the part that's on the public area because it had to do with the roundabout, you know, the four legs of the circle, you know. So it's the public section. It's got red curbs.
Were these the ones that were determined unenforceable?
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was asking. Yeah.
Beatty near Powers.
Yeah, it's a Powers and Beatty.
Yeah. Yeah, without any sort of legitimacy to the curbs themselves, then they're completely unenforceable. And I also want to go back earlier when I mentioned about the signage. I want to be clear that if a homeowner, a property owner, with the intent to post these signs is actually illegal if these signs appear to be official.
Oh, I see. Good
So-
to know. Thank you.
Mhm.
A lot of creative ideas coming from folks. I just want to make sure that we are clear. Right. So thank you. Okay, I think there's one more quick question. And do you know any of the history about how they got no parking around the school for several blocks in each direction? There's a high school that has no parking signs throughout the neighborhoods near the school. And then I guess, so the question is, because some people were asking about that, that's possible to do some kind of a restricted parking, but I know that we need data and things like that. So I was just curious if you knew any of the historical information on how they got the no parking there during school hours, 7 to 5 or 7 to 2.
Near Oak Ridge and the elementary school nearby.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Andrew, do you know the history on that?
It's very long ago. Let's see.
I'm consulting with Andrew right now. I don't know the history. I'm sorry, unfortunately. I could follow up with you. I could circle back with you.
Yeah. Circle back. Sorry, that was funny. Yeah.
And we could dig a little bit and try to find out, and maybe we could determine what at the time was the criteria. But unfortunately, I'm not aware of that history.
Okay. Well, welcome or congratulations on your promotion, and it's great to have you. Great to meet you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Hope to meet you in person sometime soon. But I'm very aware of concern. I think I met with you at a different meeting a few weeks ago too. I recognize you. So yeah, look forward to working with you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so any final questions or comments for the commander here before we move on? And we'll take any public inputs at this point as well. So anyone, public audience who'd like to raise a question or make a comment before we close this segment?
I don't see anything.
All right, so again, Rick, I'd like to thank you for the great discussion. Obviously, there's a lot more information to be exchanged. We'll continue to encourage people to feed information to you. And I recognize a lot of these issues we're talking about are longstanding issues. They're not something that just occurred, recently. They've been issues over and over again. And I do know that, for instance, the restricted parking in around Oak Ridge High School with Department of Transportation was very involved with that, as was the Board of Supervisors, to determine what the constraints were. So be happy to help and pull out the county records relative to that history. And Daryl Brown is probably the one who's closest to that within DOT, who knows those specific answers. And I know Andrew's been working with Daryl from time to time. I suspect you've had the chance to meet him as well. But he could give you, I think, the short summary of how we got to that point, because we periodically get requests for what can we do for exceptions, right? And you and I have shared a little bit of email on that. And it's just extremely difficult to figure out how you make all that work, where there's general rules, but yet in certain situations, maybe exceptions have to be put in place because of the inconvenience it creates or the safety hazard or whatever it is. But unfortunately, we don't have provisions for those kinds of things. So you always have to treat them as a one-off. How do you deal with the situation? But again, I appreciate your time here, your efforts, the communication, the outreach you've got, and we'll just continue to stay linked in terms of communicating and see if we can create some creative approaches to things that haven't been tried in the past, because that's really kind of what it comes down to. We've tried a lot of things and most of them have been successful, but a lot of them in particular areas just haven't worked. So I'll leave it at that.
I think it's a great point you just mentioned is the creativity, innovativeness, and sometimes we have to be able to realize that we're hamstringed sometimes, and we have to think outside the box and come together and determine different ways to mitigate and come up with different solutions with the same end result. So last thing I want to mention is that we were fortunate enough to receive quite a bit of grant money this year. A lot of it's focused towards DUI enhancement. Our DUI world is changing. We always continue to have the issue of the alcohol, but now with the legalization of marijuana, our department, CHP specifically, is acting sort of like an Office of Traffic Safety in that we're actually disseminating funds to other grantees, which are the other agencies, et cetera, because a lot of the tax revenue that's coming in through the Proposition 64 are funneling through this department. And so we're simply just continuing to, like I mentioned, disseminate these to other agencies. And so we have a lot of different events and DUI saturation enforcement efforts that we plan to schedule here in the next few months, especially the summertime. So that's just one more opportunity where those officers, I rely upon when it's my decision to where we're going to deploy these resources. Typically, I rely upon where these calls for services are coming in, and as I mentioned earlier, most of our calls for services are coming from El Dorado Hills within the county. It's the most densely populated area. So I think there are some solutions if you're reading between the lines of ways where we can continue our enforcement efforts.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So
thanks for having me, everybody. I appreciate talking with you guys. Great questions, and look forward to talking with you guys soon and maybe meeting you in the future in person.
excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's move on to item 5, supervisory communications, and I'm going to try to keep this brief, but to keep you informed, the first item I had here is the county mid-year budget, and there's some good news there. The projected fund balance, which is what the money left over from last year's budget. So we're now looking at when we get to the end of June and before we start the new fiscal year in July, what do we think the fund balance, unexpended funds are going to be? And the current look that we have to be updated against is it looks like we have a 21% increase in that fund balance. It amounts to $3.4 million. And I'll give you some of the reasons for that, but it looks like there is going to be some additional money this year as compared to last year for discretionary one-time use for the board to say, this is what we want you to go spend it on. And I know from my personal perspective and a lot of the other board members, we really are focusing on how do we get more money in road maintenance. And this would be that opportunity to get that started. So we've actually proposed some policy that's got to come back to the board for review. It's in a committee process right now, but to really define the intent to continuously put monies into road maintenance from the existing fund balances as we go year by year, because that's one of the easiest things to do from the standpoint of recognizing there's a great need there and trying to fill that hole, so to speak. So one part of the reasons why the general revenues are up, you have to remember that when we did our forecasting, we were anticipated a lot lower revenues in a number of different areas because we thought with all the businesses going to be closed, our sales tax revenues are going to be down. So the ones that are way up is $5.4 million in additional sales and use tax revenue above and beyond what was planned. So that is a significant increase in terms of actual revenues received as opposed to our conservative estimate. 1.6 million in additional transient occupancy tax. That's our TOT tax for vacation home rentals, hotel stays, etc. That's up substantially, and most of that is because we're doing a better job on the collection. 442,000 additional assessment and tax collection fees. We've done better from the standpoint of just the normal property tax assessment. And then 349,000 of additional funds on cannabis activities tax. So those things were above the projections. So that's helpful from the standpoint of determining that there is some fund balance to go. On the other side, we had an offset of a downward adjustment compared to what the forecast was. And that, as you might have guessed, was an interest revenue. We're down $604,000 compared to our estimate on interest revenue because interest is basically almost zero. Even when you try to, find creative ways to do that and And the county has restrictions on what you can invest in. You can't take high risk investments, but that's the one area of a major decrease from the projection. So the other thing to pay attention to here is the current fund balance does not include general fund savings as a result of the CARES Act funding that were received in 2020. So there's another opportunity there associated with savings due to CARES Act that haven't been factored into this update that will be available at the end of the year. And the projection is we'll see that there's more fund balance monies available to actually redirect to specific one-time type uses. We never want to take fund balance and try to apply it to a multi-year program unless there's goals or other things set aside. And that's kind of what we're doing with that road funding, is establishing a goal rather than a mandate. The other thing to keep in mind is that we were recently notified we'll be getting $6.5 million of additional coronavirus relief. And that's not part of this budget. That's supposed to happen, I think, very close to the current time frame. Sometime the first part of March here, we're supposed to see those additional funds that are being delivered from the state, but it's federal funds that are coming in, as I understand it. So how do we plan for those? But again, it's labeled with coronavirus relief funding. But wherever we find ways of showing how that relief funding was used, sometimes we have savings in terms of our normal plan as a result of it. So again, that can accrue some additional cost savings that could be used or interpreted as end of the year fund balance. So it's a relatively better picture than we had last year. And we'll just have to see how the numbers come in final line, and then what the board's decision on discretionary items as to where to put the expenditures of those fund balances into play. So I'll move on and cover the second and third one, and then we'll take questions and answers on it if there are any. The second one is we're encouraging the public to submit letters to the governor's office. In fact, all of your state elected officials relative to our current allocation of the vaccine, the COVID vaccine. I know Cindy has posted the letter that the Board of Supervisors sent to the governor, and our PIO, Public Information Officer, Director of Communications, Carla Haas, has likewise put stuff out on social media encouraging people to write individual letters. There's been recent movement perhaps for the state to look at, okay, counties with a very high population of seniors should be getting a higher allocation. I've seen some of that, but I've also seen things that we have unrepresented or poorly represented districts, which are poor districts across the state, and people think they should be getting big increases in their vaccination distribution. So CETA is going to report on some of that stuff. But again, at this level, we're just encouraging people to submit a letter, a note, an email, something to the governor and some of the elected legislators in California to encourage them to reconsider our situation consistent with what the board's letter is. So I'll leave it at that. The next thing I want to mention is there was a presentation made by the city of Folsom relative to the Empire Ranch US 50 interchange that's in their planning. They held a Zoom meeting, quite informational, on February 24th. It was about an hour and a half. They provided us a website where that information is available. I'm not going to try to read it to you because it's not a common website, but we'll put it into our minutes. And they're encouraging people to go out to the website and to better understand what's planned there. But most people want to know, well, when will the road improvements be made, the interchange, and then when will it connect to White Rock Road? And the bottom line is currently projected is that construction of the interchange wouldn't start until probably first or second quarter of 2025. So we got a couple of years here before you would start to see that, but there is a project schedule out on the website that shows you current time frame, preliminary design, environmental phase, and then starting at the end of this calendar year, final design phase, and then construction, if the funding is available. That's a big caveat, starting out in 2025. So I know there was a lot of questions as well as to the alignment of where the extension of the interchange, i.e. Empire Ranch Boulevard south to connect to White Rock Road, where that actual intersection would be. They have some notional figures that kind of show the approximate location, but it's definitely going to be very close to the county line. It isn't going to come back and hit Old Placerville Road or something rather and compound that intersection as I understand it. But a lot of the details of where that road intersection is going to be met up is consistent with the Folsom Ranch developers and what they're planning for their subdivisions and communities and those thoroughfares. So there's a lot more information to come on that, but I just did want to mention, I know APAC and a number of other people participated in that. I thought it was a good short presentation. They referred to the EIR that's out there. They referred to some of the mitigation that has to be done, some sound wall mitigation that has to be done, some roadway noise mitigation that has to be done as well, various things. So if you have an interest in that intersection and ultimately its connection to White Rock Road, I would encourage you to go out and visit the website. I didn't find when I went today and visited the website, the actual briefing package that they presented on the 24th. I assume they're just a little bit delayed in getting that out there. But I would encourage everybody to start with that as the general understanding, and then do the drill downs and dig deeper into the EIR and stuff if you want. But hopefully they'll have that package out on the website fairly soon. So those are the 3 items I wanted to cover quickly. So first of all, to the panelists, any questions or comments on those 3 items? All right, very good. Not seeing any. Can we turn it over to the public? Anyone in the public want to raise their hand? And Cindy, if you want to tell people what they can do to connect by phone if they're not on Zoom.
Well, if you're not on Zoom, press *9 and we'll call you by the last 3 numbers of your phone.
Thank you.
It looks like Dan.
Okay, Dan.
You're muted, Dan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can now.
Okay. This is Dan Cockcroft. I'm resident of Four Seasons. And I also watched the presentation of the interchange that they're planning to build from Folsom over Highway 50, the Imperial Ranch interchange. And as John said, it looks like it's going to intersect somewhere around White Rock and Carson Creek. It's going to make that an extremely busy intersection. It's going from a 2-lane back road to having 2 parkways of 4 to 6 lanes each crossing there. And I also noticed that the traffic they were predicting was going to be somewhere around 24,000 vehicles a day on that interchange. And I don't know how many of those are going to run into El Dorado Hills, but right now they're only doing 8,000. So that's a 3-fold increase in the people there. I was also
the traffic analysis tells you that distribution a little bit if you dig down and look at that, but that's.
Yeah, but I think we all can pretty well agree it's going to be a major thoroughfare for El Dorado residents to go to Folsom to come to El Dorado. The what I found interesting too is they talked about the noise abatement. As you're well aware of, Mr. Heidel, that the residents of Four Seasons have noticed an extreme increase in noise already, and we're worried there's going to be 3 times more cars there. What's it's going to do? But I noticed in their noise abatement that there's the federal standard and the state standard, and I noticed that Folsom has their own standard, which is more, lowers even the amount of noise allowed. And I was curious why, or if El Dorado County has a separate standard and what it is. And if it does not have a separate standard, what does it take to get one for the county?
I'm not aware of a separate county standard on noise. I would ask Commissioner Vania, since he's on the planning commission, if he's aware of anything like that, but I don't believe that exists for El Dorado County.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no separate standard. It would be for the level of environmental review. Like say if it was CEQA, it would be the state standard. And if it was NEPA, a federal document, then I would presume that they would have to adhere to the NEPA standards.
But it's apparently Folsom has even a stricter standard.
Well, yeah, I don't believe the county has that in El Dorado. They may.
We don't, we could look at it, but I'm not aware of it. Maybe it's been looked at in the past, but it doesn't exist today as part of our policies, so.
Well, I think if the county had a stricter standard like Folsom's, we might better address some of the noise problems we're anticipating coming up.
Understand.
All right.
So that's definitely a consideration. I know there's costs associated with all those things, but that shouldn't be a deterrent at some level, so.
Yeah,
Thank you for your comment.
All right, thank you very much, Mr.
There's
Heidel.
one other thing I want to add very quickly, and that is this interchange design is a little bit unique because it really incorporates traffic circles. And evidently the question came up, you know, are there any examples we can go look at of this type of an interchange which incorporates traffic circles to get the traffic to slow down, et cetera? And the answer was no. There's nothing nearby of this type. There are examples in other parts of California and obviously other states. But this would be the first project of this type in our area, at least the way it's currently planned. So for people who have an interest in how traffic circles work when you combine the interchange, looking at the choices they looked at, the alternatives and what they ended up selecting, I think there's some good logic to follow in terms of how they came up with the configuration they did and how they rejected the other one. So when I look at the situation we have at Missouri Flat Road, for instance, wow, this would have been the right way to do that, but that was done 15, 20 years ago, something like that. So, but they're always looking at new methods to try to improve the safety of these interchanges, and then getting people to slow down a little bit is a real positive benefit of traffic circles. So I'm going to leave it at that. Any other public questions or comments?
Joel.
Joel.
Yes, you mentioned that this package is they hadn't posted the package. When they do, will you put the link in the minutes to the meeting?
The link to their website we'll put in the minutes, and we can look periodically to see when it's been posted and then put out a separate email to people saying it's now been posted. Maybe that's the best way to do it, is use our email distribution list so you would know when you can go look to find it.
Thank you.
And if it doesn't appear in a week or so, we can make a phone call and ask them when they're going to get it out there. But I assume it's just a little bit delayed and they haven't quite gotten to it yet, but hopefully they will.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and include that on the APAC website as soon as we were waiting for the presentation packet to be made available. But we've linked it on our social media before. We'll do it again on the website when it's available.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So we'll try to get the information out many different ways as we can to people. So, all right.
And Wendy May.
Yes, Wendy.
Just speaking to the fact that the noise abatement standard is the same for Sacramento County as it is for El Dorado County.
Right, at the county levels, what you typically find is they just follow state procedures.
Yes.
City levels, they have a lot more discretion on establishing ordinances, and they also have more revenues to fund for things like that. So the city of Folsom has a number of different things, including unique no parking sign standards and towing and those kinds of things, because it's the city police who enforces those things, as opposed to, you know, the resources that we use through the CHP and the sheriff. So people just need to recognize city government and the things it's able to do, and its funding streams are different than county government. So that's a good
True,
point.
true. I was only speaking to the noise abatement.
Right, but in a lot of cases, yes, there's similarities.
Correct.
All right, any other?
That's it.
Okay, so then let's move on to our leadership team progress reports. Let's start with public safety, as we always do. Do we have our sheriff's representative with us this evening? Alex, are you there?
Yeah, I saw him earlier. Oh, there he is. Okay, yeah, there he is.
Okay, Alex, take it away.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you now, Alex. Go ahead.
Hi, hello, everybody. I'm Detective Morton. I'm with the Sheriff's Office. I have some numbers today to present to you guys on some cases from the El Dorado Hills. So for the week of February 11th through February 17th, El Dorado Hills had a total number of 11 cases that were drawn. Additionally, from February 18th to February 24th, El Dorado Hills had a total of 10 cases. Just to clarify, those are cases that have been generated, usually crime reports. Not all calls for service generate a crime report or any report in general. So those are just the number of reports taken. That covers basically all of the calls for all of the calls that we get. It includes, you know, property crimes, assaults, persons crimes, 5150 calls. I'm just going to touch on the property crimes aspect of it. So within that period of time, basically kind of what we saw in Dorado Hills as far as property crimes go, there were a few vehicle burglaries and a vandalism. We did have a catalytic converter theft on the night of February 20th. We did have a theft from a vehicle on the night of the 17th. Looks like we had a garage that was broken into off in the Lake Forest Apartments. We had a couple embezzlement cases that I'm currently working. We had a theft of a bike. We had a few other vandalisms, and again, those are the cases that involve the property crimes. All the other cases that I mentioned, those are going to involve other things, like I said, persons crimes or drug alcohol incidences or 5150 type incidences. So that's all I have as far as numbers go for the El Dorado Hills for the past 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. So questions or comments from panelists first for Alex? Okay, seeing none right now, let's open it up to the public for any public questions or comments on the sheriff's report.
Wendy May?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Oops. Oh, Robin? You done mute? Robin, are you able to unmute?
Yes, can you hear me now? I thought you were. So I read the Nextdoor app a lot, and I noticed that there is a theft of a bike. Was that inside a garage?
It was the one that I mentioned was from an open garage on Southernest Drive.
Have you noticed, like, and also in this neighboring towns, like in Folsom, that there are more garage burglaries?
You know, I can't answer that because I don't know. I do sometimes, work with and talk to the other detectives from Folsom because, we share a border. So, however, I don't know their stats or kind of what they're dealing. I would imagine that they're probably deal with much of the same things that we deal with. But I don't have those numbers or an answer for you on that.
Yeah, it seemed like garage burglaries are increasing, tools being stolen, and
yeah, it does seem like that. We have, from my desk, I have noticed sort of a small uptick. But it's garages, it's vehicles, both of those. So
now going forward with the increase in density of and housing in the area, do you have any kind of plan going forward to curb this, or any kind of campaign to bring awareness to people?
We try to put out as much information on our Facebook page, and we try to put out information that tips, things that people can do, the residents of El Dorado County, El Dorado Hills, things that they can do to kind of make themselves not as easy as of a target, and kind of eliminate as many victims as we can. And some of those things are easy, things that we probably do already, locking our windows, our doors, removing valuables from our cars, easy things like that. We always try to put information out on Facebook like that and remind people. I know our star volunteers, they do a great job. They come out to neighborhood watch meetings or programs, neighborhoods that are going to be implementing neighborhood watches. They come out and they kind of, give presentations and try to help quarterback those things to give everyone a good sense of what they can do and how they can kind of organize and keep everybody safe and keep everybody from being a victim. So we do try to do that. I know that, like you said, I mean, we're going to be having, it seems like, there's an increase in population, and so to deal with that, I mean, I know that we've talked about, and I don't know the status of this. I know we've talked about license plate readers going up throughout the county. I don't know what the status of that is. I'm hoping that that's something that would go through, because that would drastically help me in solving the crimes that I deal with on a daily basis. So if something like that happens, that would be great. I know there's probably issues and concerns with that. And again, that's above my level. But if that goes in, that would be a great tool for people like me to use.
Is there a way that the community can support that, putting the license plate readers? I don't know if it's legislation or policy, helping to advocate for that.
I'm not 100% sure. Again, it's a couple steps above my level. I would say just, reach out to the sheriff's office and express your support. Maybe, express your support to your elected officials as well. Just that, that's something that could be a good and investigative tool for our office. And I think that there are, issues. I think the main issues come down to cost, but again, that's above my level. So I would have to get back to you on that as far as if there's anything specific that you can do.
Yeah. Okay. And then just another one. I noticed that there was a psychedelic mushroom grow happening in a residence. You're aware of that? Obviously, I think it was El Dorado Hills.
I am. If it's the one I'm thinking of, you're talking about, yes.
There's not more than one. So is there any correlation between a grow being in the area and then sales of the product also in the area? I'm probably not the best person to ask about that, because I don't know the circumstances of that case in particular. I know what you're talking about. However, I know that we have a general investigation unit, which I'm a part of, and then we have a narcotic investigation unit, which they deal with all of the narcotics, drugs, anything concerned with that. So I would refer you to them for that type of question. But I would say that I don't know. I just, because I don't, like I said, I don't know the circumstances of the case. I don't know if a grow was involved, if someone is growing whatever substance they're growing for personal use or to sell. I don't know. Yeah. So and one of the reasons I asked that, I don't live too far from Heaven, and I know the correlation, and I know my husband and I have seen transactions happening in and around the area. So there's always an interest in, when something like that happens, like looking at the economics of it, not just the fact that it's illegal, but it's also being sold and distributed somewhere. So, for safety reasons, community, and especially what happens in the dark areas like by Heaven and then up by Calathea Park, just to be aware of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Else?
No, that's it.
All right. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate the report.
Thank you.
With that, let's move on to Officer Andrew Brown, if he's with us.
Yes, there he is.
And your boss kind of stole some of your thunder, so I'm not expecting as big a report today, Andrew, but that's a good thing, right?
I know. What can you do? That's okay. I'm glad he got on there, meet everyone. You can see his face, and he can see who you all are, and all the complaining I do means nothing. No, I'm just kidding.
Keep it up though, would you?
No, I know. So just to address a couple of issues. So there is an issue with cars meeting up at the Safeway up there off of Francisco and Green Valley. We're aware of that. It's a regular thing up there on the weekends. This Saturday or this Friday, there was some intel that there was going to be a run from an Elk Grove location to an El Dorado Hills location of some persons that like tuner cars and things like that. Didn't quite pan out. The intel didn't quite pan out, but the whole reason why I'm bringing that up is these persons that travel from place to place, they're coming from all over the Sacramento region. Our Valley Division specifically has one specific officer that he gathers intel on street racing and its goings on, where they're coming from, where they're going to, where they're meeting up, what their criminal activity is within this group and all that. So we did get additional officers out there on Friday night, Saturday night, to do some patrol and specifically some enforcement on some loud exhausts, because we know that that's an issue for sure for a quiet neighborhood like El Dorado Hills. We want to make sure that when it's quiet time, it's quiet time. So we got out there and conducted a lot of that. And a lot of times people see the loud exhaust as just a standalone thing, but it's not. It is a holistic enforcement that we're conducting, where likely some street racer who in the future may engage in street racing, crash and kill his passenger, or kill somebody else, or kill themselves. Sometimes this ticket for loud exhaust is like the beginning of the tracking of this behavior. And so we use this to build cases against people that are large and intense for street racing, modifying of vehicles, and eventually very far down the road being able to take their vehicles away from them. So it's a big holistic thing that we do. It's not just a quick fix it ticket, although it is correctable, and or in some instances it is correctable now. But we also understand that when we get phone calls from people that are complaining about, goodness gracious, it's really noisy on Silva Valley Parkway at night. We may not think initially, we as officers, we just dealt with some big situations, that's a big deal. But to that person at that time, that's huge. And I want to let people know that are hearing me and listening to the Highway Patrol that we are listening. We do understand that is a big deal for you. You keep on getting woken up at night, you're not getting good sleep. It affects your whole life. And so we want to go after these loud exhausts as much as we can. So that was Saturday night. That was dedicated to that. Any questions, concerns, anything for me? I think, like you said, Lieutenant Hatfield kind of covered quite a bit of things that are generally of topic.
Okay, panelists, any questions or comments on Andrew's report?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, my computer died, so I'm on my phone, but thank you, Andrew, for sharing that. I've noticed, and my neighbors up here and around Calithia Park, Heaven, there's a lot more of that kind of really loud muffler speeding, and it's significant, the uptick in that in the last couple months. So I'm very appreciative that you guys are aware of it and you're looking at it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's open it up to the public. Any public comments or questions for Officer Brown?
Robin.
Hello again.
Hi there.
So is this, do you think this could develop into like sideshow type stuff, or?
So that's what we want to prevent. We're not afraid to go up and just talk to these people. We have officers that we have no inhibitions. So we'll just straight up walk up into the group and just start talking to them. This last week, we had really good conversations with a group that was at Safeway. Their intention, and obviously their intention, is to not create an issue where they're leaving skid marks on parking lots and roadways in the area. They know, they understand squeaky wheels get the grease, and so we're the grease, and they're the squeaky wheels if they get too loud. And so talking to the organizer, they try to keep their groups clean of those personalities. And like Lieutenant Hatfield If they're going to Safeway, they're buying, their soapy drink and going out, standing next to their car and looking at each other's cars. Generally think that that's a great activity. It's when it goes into loud exhausts, nuisance noises, and sideshow activity. So it's a constant just tamping down of this behavior, letting them know we're here by just going and talking to them. And it's kind of one of those things that always car guys really like talking to highway patrol. It's that constant cat and mouse, and we love it. We like talking to them. They love talking to us. It is a hilarious thing if you actually come witness it. But we a lot of times will speak the same language. Highway patrol officers really like cars too, and so we have a kind of a good relationship. There are a couple of groups in the Sacramento area that do have a specific criminal element to them. And you've noticed some in the news the last couple of weeks where highway patrol got in numerous pursuits. I think it was more than 2 pursuits in a single Saturday afternoon, multiple arrests, guns seized, things like that. And those all came from sideshow activity and street racing activity that, our social media and our intel tipped us off that was coming. We actually overstaffed it and we're able to attack that. So we're on it for the whole Sacramento region. It's just like you said, it's like a cat and mouse game. But yeah, that's what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent that sideshow activity.
Yeah, I'm so pleased to hear that. Another concern that I had was the firearms that do, tend to go along with those sideshows sometimes. And another thing that you brought up, I'd like to maybe draw a little bit of hyper attention to, and I'd ask Supervisor Heidel to pay attention to this as well, is the fact that the people that come to these car activities, they're from all over, you said all over the Sacramento region. And that's another thing that we're getting up the hill, up above heaven, that people are coming from different regions. And so the area is becoming like a more of a regional destination for different groups, different groups of people. And when we try to talk with, different community groups like the CSD, they're kind of blind to it, that it's not, regional, that it's all El Dorado Hills residents. And it's very anxiety provoking because, I do, at least me, I do pay attention to what goes on in the news and what goes on in, different local agency reports. And I thank you for your work that you're doing. We're car people too. We love cars. We do have one loud car, but we, don't use it on nighttime. And I appreciate your sensitivity to the quiet, rural environment that El Dorado Hills is. So thank you very much.
Yeah. I mean, how dare we build a beautiful place that people want to come visit? I'm sure Supervisor Heidel that's a great thing that people come to our community shop and spend their money here. That is a good thing.
Right.
So just
Right.
like I said, it's a balance, and we want to make sure that the element doesn't cross into the criminal, and that's why we're as high profile as we can, going directly into them. We let them know we're watching them. We let them know we're there. Our cars aren't secretive. We're not trying to be sly. We're not putting undercover cops in with them. No, we're black and whites, uniforms, blue and red lights. We're out there. They know we're there.
Yeah, I understand we want people, there is the economic factor, but at the same time, it's a dark area and it's going to stay a dark area. It's in, the Sierra foothills. So, yeah, thank you again. That's it.
Anyone else?
I think that's it.
All right, well, thank you, Andrew, again for your comments. Appreciate that.
Yes.
And let's go to the El Dorado Hills Fire, and if nothing else, an update on the vaccination clinic that was held this last weekend. So I don't see Chief Lilly on. Maybe I'm missing him. So
no, Chief Lilly is out on a structural fire call right now, so he's not going to make the meeting. 2 things, I think, from the fire department perspective. It's only March 1, but it's never too early to think about defensible space. Those weeds that you see in your yard that are about 1 inch tall now, and in 6 to 8 weeks could be 1 foot tall. It's time to start thinking of clearing, weed whacking those stuff down when it's time. If you have any fallen branches or limbs or dead shrubs, it's time to clear those off. Get ready. Second, the vaccination clinic that occurred last Saturday at Station 86, almost 700 people went through. It was phenomenally successful. The vaccination groups that were done were over 75, and then over 400 school teacher and school district employees also got vaccinated, which is obviously essential to getting the schools up and running in a safe manner. So, kudos to everyone involved, the El Dorado Fire Department CERT team, and I know Joel Wiley, and also my fellow board member, Bobby Bennett, who's on this call as well. They're part of the CERT team, and they were very active, not only this week, but in previous weeks. The school district, a lot of their employees came down and assisted, and also a lot of the county health department people were there. But finally, we were covered with a lot of media coverage. Chief Johnson was on Fox 40, and they covered it. I know Village Life and Mountain Democrat covered it. And I want to do a huge shout out to Chief Michael Lilienthal. Chief Lilienthal, and I'm probably a good thing he's not on there because he would be embarrassed, but he's going to be honored tomorrow morning by the city of South Lake Tahoe as a hero of COVID. Ever since COVID started, Chief Lilly has been sort of the fire department, representative of all fire departments in the county, covering the COVID issue, working with the county Office of Emergency to set up systems and programs, and he is being recognized by the city of South Lake Tahoe tomorrow. So a huge shout out to Chief Mike. End of my report.
Thank you, Tim. Very good. Yeah, I also have a lot of appreciation for all the extra effort that Chief Lilly's put into these things. I mean, he's just been everywhere doing everything way beyond what's expected. And so kudos to the fire department, to him personally, and the combined effort of the whole community to make these things happen. And it's just been a huge success. And we can show that in comparison to other counties of how well we're doing, given the fact if our supply of the vaccine is good, we'll get it distributed. We'll get the right people there on a priority basis and stuff and do our part. It's the limitation has been the supply. And again, Cedar will get to talk about some of those things a little bit here. So any questions or comments for Tim relative to the fire department report? Anyone on the panel? Not seeing anyone from the public. Raise your hands or hit *9. All right, so we'll close it with that. Thanks again, Tim, for filling in, and we'll hope Chief Lilly get some rest sometime, because that's the part I could become concerned with. It seems like he's going all the time doing all kinds of things, but much appreciated. So, okay, so let's move on. Economic development is the next one. We're going to defer that until the next meeting. Glenn Krakow would normally give us that report. I can tell you that their primary focus, as I understand it from the last discussion they had, was to form a subcommittee to look at how they explore improving our fair operations, the use of the fairgrounds, better utilization, better marketing, better revenue generation, those kinds of things, getting outside of the traditional box that we've operated in for many years. Not that it's been a bad place to be, but things are changing, and we really need to figure out a way to ultimately raise enough funds to rebuild a lot of the infrastructure that's on that fairgrounds. It's become outdated, it's become very old, and it's been kind of a, year by year, how do you get through this year and look to next year? And we need to take a bigger picture look at that. So CDAC, I think, is going to step up and help look at those aspects of it. How do we better monetize it? How do we get better utilization? Still with respect and preserving all of the ongoing programs, the county fair that we have, all of the FHA and other associated efforts that go on, Future Farmers of America, which is to the FFA, and other ag-related industries in terms of making sure that they're all supported. So that's what I know his effort is. We'll leave it at that. So let's move to infrastructure. And I did ask John Vania to go ahead and give us an update or a little brief comments about the workshop that was held by the Planning Commission on the Bass Lake Park activities, and then anything he'd like to add. So.
All right, thank you, Supervisor Heidel. Yeah, we had last week we had a workshop that was put on by County Planning in coordination with the CSD on the Bass Lake Park. And so there was lots of issues and questions raised by our commissioners, as well as some members of the public as well, concerning traffic, pedestrian issues, access, not just at the park, but across the street in association with Bridalwood, with the draw to the Safeway complex and so forth. So a lot of good feedback, a lot of good input for them to consider. It's kind of early on in the environmental review process that they're going through. So it gave them a lot of good issues to consider when it comes to that. So was there any questions concerning that in particular?
I did sit in and listen to that, and I would just like to congratulate the commission, because every single commissioner had awesome questions and had some issues that they wanted addressed, and I think that it gave the CSC some very good feedback for how they're going to proceed. I think it was a pretty comprehensive meeting on something that is so early in the planning stages, but hats off to your commission.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we got some, a lot of, all of our commissioners, they got a lot of good experience, and so that showed at that hearing. So thank you, John. Anybody else?
I am multitasking. I am on a Zoom for
You see- Oh, is that when?
So any questions or comments from the public?
No.
Okay, we're not saying anyone. All right, anything else you want to report on, John?
Yeah, next week we have at our commission meeting next week. Well, first of all, we have, before that, we have a joint hearing with our counter board members. So that'll be
complimentary. Come on.
counter. It can be complimentary.
Okay.
But should be a good meeting. Looking forward. That's going to be the first of our kind with the current makeup of the planning commission and the board. So looking forward to that. So and then our regular planning commission meeting, the one issue of note would be the cell tower at Oak Ridge High School. So we'll be considering that as well. So, and if there's any other issues related to the planning commission, let me know.
All right, very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So let's move on to good governance. Richard.
Well, Alan has his
Oh,
hand.
I'm sorry, I didn't see the hand.
Alan, yeah. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Alan.
Yeah, real quick, any update on what's happening with the Costco project?
We ask every month of our DOT director, and he tells us he hears next month. So that's what we hear every month. So
I was at the Costco in Folsom, and I mentioned that that was a development that was possibly proceeding, and they thought that the owner had withdrawn his withdrew his purchase and no longer was going to be there.
yeah, I've not heard that. So
Anyway,
any
that's
other-
just a rumor. Don't believe it. I want to hear officially from you guys.
Yep. Well, nothing official other than next month. So
Okay.
we're into March now. So
Very good. Thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else?
That's it.
Okay, let's go to good governance. And I did identify one topic, redistricting, which has had some recent changes in direction on it. And so I don't know if Richard's had a chance to research that, but I can backfill with some things if he hasn't. But good governance, Richard.
I'll let you follow up on what I've got. Is the
Okay.
obviously the 2020 census had a rough go because of COVID, and then several significant lawsuits relative to who should be counted in the census. And the current information basically shows that the actual release of the census information as it will redistrict within states is actually going to be delayed until no earlier than July of this year. So I think there'll be a certain amount of delayed receipt of information as it may affect other things down the information stream, which would ultimately affect how the population in El Dorado County has shifted and changed relative to the census data. So you may have more to add on that, John. I tried to determine if in our county government, such as in the assessor's office, it can be determined the number of properties becoming residents during the decade between 2010 and 2020. I tried a couple searches, but I couldn't find any statistical data associated with the assessor's office in that regard. I inquired as to whether housing starts relative to each year were available, but I didn't exhaust all of the possible categories that might contain that, and therefore identify where were people moving into and what that might identify relative to the BOS redistricting. So that's fundamentally all I had on the redistricting. I would like to give a shout out though to what our local fire department did with the vaccinations and Chief Lilienthal, because very candidly, it demonstrates once again that grassroots efforts can be the most efficient way of getting a job done. And some of this top-down nonsense that goes on is very frustrating from a good governance point of view. I would like to add an asterisk in doing some of the research on the census. One of the first acts that President Biden did on January 20th through an executive order is to discontinue citizenship tabulations at the city block level, and allowing that non-citizens in the country illegally will no longer be excluded from the numbers used for apportioning congressional seats among the states. So fundamentally, if you think about it, a sanctuary state like California that can absorb undocumented, and I can't say illegal aliens anymore because that word has been taken from the lexicon, non-citizens, it can basically pad its numbers and inflate the allowable number of congressional districts it can have. So governance continues at all levels, whether you like it or not. John, do you want to add anything about the?
Yeah, I have some specific information to add relative to the county redistricting. And obviously redistricting happens at the state level, happens at the federal level, but at the county level, the original plan was the county was supposed to receive all of the data from the U.S. Census Bureau by March 31st of this year, i.e. in another month, right? They've hedged and hedged and hedged. And then on February 12th, about 2 weeks ago, they announced that deadline and that data rather would not be available until September 30th of this year, 2021. Now the issue comes into play is that there's a requirement by the state law that we have to have all the redistricting final maps approved back to the state by December 15th of 2021. So now we just got squeezed into a time frame that says we don't get the data till the end of September and it's got to be done by the middle of December. And yet there's a public process involved with this. The state prescribes we can only have 2 meetings prior to collecting the data on the public process. And there has to be 2 public meetings between when the data is available and when we have to submit our final. So this timeline for public input and stuff gets tremendously squeezed after we know what the real data is. So the approach the county's trying to take is we want to look at as many alternatives and ideas that we have in the first 2 meetings before we get the data to really try to lay out a detailed plan of how we're going to march through these things. And ultimately, the board will make the decision, the final decision on how we redistrict within El Dorado County to meet the specific criteria. One of the things that's going on is back in June of this year, the state legislature, recognizing these delays, passed Assembly Amendment number 26 that allowed some things to change But they also said the measure would not allow the commission to extend the deadline for final map approval beyond December 15th. So they locked themselves into this December 15th thing by the action they took back in June. But the latest information we received is that there's now a new legislative action going on. This was received February 19th, that Senate Bill 594 is being proposed. And the legislation, it is the intent of the legislature to enact legislation that would mitigate issues surrounding the potential delay in the release of data from the United States Census and the effect of that delay on local redistricting. And I'll understand local, which to them probably includes state redistricting, county, cities, and such. So there's no certainty as what's in SB 594, whether or not it's going to be passed. So we're in this state like COVID has been, that every day we get new information, right? And you're supposed to jump and respond to try to meet the criteria and jump through the hoops. I mean, the whole thing between the federal census numbers being released, and I recognize COVID has slowed a lot of stuff down. But again, the state didn't take the proper provisions up until this recent look to try to figure out how to make sure there's adequate time for the public process. So we'll see what 594 has, but all I can say is stay tuned, because once we start the public meetings, we're allowed the 2 meetings before we actually get the data. Before September 30th, we will hold 2 meetings with the best ideas, the best alternatives available. A lot of the redistricting is going to be driven by basically our surveyor's office, who has the maps and the knowledge of how to determine what populations are. Once those final numbers are in, we have pretty good ideas of the trends, where we've had population growth, where we've had actually reductions in population. So we've got, you know, a reasonable starting point, but we can't do the final stuff until we get the numbers on September 30th. Hopefully it happens before that, but no later than September 30th is what we understand right now. So I just want to make people aware that's not the county's desire, because I'm sure there's going to be public criticism of the Board of Supervisors that you guys jammed this thing through. You did it all in closed session. No, we tried to follow the process we have to follow, but we had other constraints imposed upon us in timelines. So between the federal government, the state government, this particular redistricting effort, the county level, is going to be very much, I think, controversial by the time it comes out, because there hasn't been enough time to listen to everybody and take all the considerations and maybe do a couple of iterations. We're not going to have time from September 30th to December 15th to do a number of iterations. It's going to be fine tuning and not major iterations. So I just want to make people aware of that, because it is another constraint that's been imposed on county government. So
John, I would make an a suggestion.
Yes.
That you get a little ahead of this. I think an interview. Also, congratulations on your appointment to the Pioneer Board. I'm glad that the county is moving forward in that area. But I would make the suggestion that the Board of Supervisors get out front of this thing, rather than have it roll out in August, that all of a sudden, guess what, folks, you might be in a different district. Fundamentally, it's going to be the western border of the county that's going to get its district borders changed. This is where all the consolidated growth is. Anybody who thinks back to 2010 and now look at 2020 and think of the development that's occurred all around that we've seen and drove by, it's going to impact this area. I think several articles may be getting out explaining the crunch in Village Life or Mountain Democrat to get the information out better. I'm sorry, Board of Supervisors meetings and minutes and all that stuff are not what are read at daily coffee. And the Sacramento Bee, for those who still take it, isn't educational beyond the state capitol and homelessness and COVID. So I say get out in front of it, get the information out, and let people digest it in the different media that they are actually reading. I know you do those things kind of automatically, and I'm kind of suggesting things that I'm sure you've already thought of. So
a perfect segue, because what Don Ashton, our CEO, gave me was a note that said, on March 16th, the board meeting on March 16th, staff is planning to have an agenda item discussing the redistricting process. So that's the first step, to define what that process is, who the players will be, what the approximate timelines are to get that discussion started. So I haven't heard of any changes, so you might want to put March 16th on a hold the date type of thing, and we'll have, I'm sure this will probably be a time allocated discussion. So in setting up the agenda, we'll go through and say, yeah, we want to have this at a specific time, because it's important enough for all the public to know that even though that time is approximate, it's not determined, it's an allocation, that if you call in approximately that time or a little bit ahead of that time, you should be able to participate in that discussion. So it's a key one, I think, because there's always a lot of conjecture about backroom deals and how these things happened and how you redistrict to make sure that the existing incumbent supervisor gets left into the process. And it really comes up for consideration when they're subject to the next re-election cycle. So in my particular case, I've been through the election cycle. My status doesn't change, but for instance, on District 4 is up for re-election in 2 years, and that could very much, with the redistricting, affect, you know, who the candidates might be, how that would run. So no matter what time frame it's done, there's always some affected parts of the district or the county that are more affected than others, but everybody truly gets affected by this because it really is a representation in terms of the voting membership of the Board of Supervisors. So I think we'll leave it at that. A good discussion, but tune in on March 16th if you want to understand more. And if that changes for some reason, we'll try to keep you updated on what has changed to. But,
It's a department matter, there's no time certain.
well, but we haven't done agenda review, have we?
Currently it is.
Yeah, but we haven't done agenda review. So one of the things we do with agenda review is we look at where the proposals are for things and determine, is it department matter, which means public comment, but not a time allocated. This one I think has to be time allocated. We changed those today in our agenda review. So there's always that review process with the board chair, and typically the vice chair is involved as well. And then other board members have participants there, typically their assistants. So we'll handle that, but I think that needs to be a time allocated activity personally. So we'll leave it at that unless there's any questions or comments at this point. So do we have any from the panelists? Okay, anybody from the public?
No.
All right, let's move on to healthy communities and COVID and vaccinations and other things going on. See ya.
All right, hi there. I just want to agree with other comments about Chief Lilienthal. He did a really great job. The vaccine clinic at Fire Station 86 was very well organized and very well staffed. We moved through people very quickly. It was awesome. I had the honor to volunteer all day and it was a great experience. And something that Mike shared was that he thought ahead and bought a freezer early on in this process so he could store vaccines, thinking he was going to use it for his staff. And that's what they've been able to use for the public in these vaccine clinics. That's pretty awesome thinking. Okay, so a couple things. Many of you know Johnson & Johnson's been approved and it's starting to be shipped out. That's the single dose vaccine. So that'll be nice. We are going to be pretty close to vaccinating 3 million people a day soon in the United States. So that's good news.
So one thing I want to talk about,
see, I did
Johnson just briefly, and I know you know this, it is a different form of vaccine than the first two, the Moderna and the Pfizer, which are an RNA type of vaccine. Johnson & Johnson is a different type of vaccine, more of a traditional flu, annual flu type of vaccine. So there are those considerations. Its effectiveness is not as great, but it is a different vaccine, which I personally feel a little bit more comfortable as compared to some of the RNA stuff. I've read articles on it that concern me. So it's just it's a personal choice when it comes down to it. But people need to be aware that there are differences in some of these vaccines, particularly the J&J one's coming out now.
Yeah, I think that one's effectiveness is somewhere in the mid to high 80s, which is still really good. And so, yeah, people can make that decision. I did get the Moderna vaccine, my first dose of that, and I'm doing okay. I had a really sore shoulder for a day and a half. But I hear that the symptoms get worse on your second dose if you're going to have symptoms. Let's see. Okay, so something else I want to put out there, and if you guys and anyone in the community who's listening knows some particularly vulnerable seniors, and I have my own reach out efforts going on with some senior populations and different HOAs and facilities and kind of, oops, oh, hold on. Someone's coming in on my phone here. Sorry. I have a contact at Public Health now that wants to work with me and us to set aside block times for any particularly vulnerable seniors. So if we can get a group to get some groups and to get a block of people, we can help get them in to have a special time, okay, to get vaccinated at the county clinics. So that's really good news. It's awesome. So I'll do some reach out to those communities. Let's see. And then California, they're starting a new kind of distribution. Blue Shield's going to take over and help to try to streamline things with the county to county. It's kind of been piecemeal. So apparently they're going to take over some of those efforts to see how the doses would go from the state to each county. They would kind of take over those allocation guidelines based on what the state's been doing so far loosely. And that's something that John was alluding to, that this has changed a lot, the framework and their decisions on who they prioritize and moving things around. So one of the things I was hearing recently is like, when they look at counties, what's the percentage of seniors? What's the percentage, how many people they have living what they call the lowest quartile? It's a socioeconomic, they call it the healthy index, health equity index. And then also maybe looking at specific groups, how many percentages are working, like a food ag, things like that. So there's more to learn there, how that's going to work out. We'll see. We're doing good. The county, we've had, really throughout the state, we've had a real significant drop in test positivity and case rates. So that's hopeful. And we're heading into red. John, are we going to be in red? Like,
We're still
we're
crossing
really
our
close
fingers right now. The numbers are supposed to come out on Tuesday, which would be tomorrow. So we should know with tomorrow's numbers, according to, Dr. Williams.
It looks good. We're really hopeful for that. The state also, because of the drop in test positivity, has decided to allow more sports. So youth athletics, they have modifications and rules they have to do, like weekly testing for football, rugby, water polo, but they are allowing kids to get back to doing some athletics with some modifications. And then let's see here. Okay. I wanted to tell you guys, I did also go to the Opioid Coalition this last month. And that was interesting to go and learn that with the COVID pandemic, we have seen more drug overdoses, hospitalizations, and deaths from substance abuse. There's a significant rise in the amount of fentanyl being found in various products, street products. So anything from, heroin, methamphetamines, cocaine, things like that, they're being laced with fentanyl. And that's very scary because it increases the risk of overdose. And the Sierra Harm Reduction Coalition is partnering with the county's efforts, and they're going to do so education and outreach. And so that goes to the community, all of us, to learn more about substance abuse, to help reduce the stigma. So people who might be struggling or suffering don't feel as much shame to get help. Harm reduction also means providing fentanyl test strips. People can test products, needle exchange, education on how to get treatment, more outreach in that way. And let's see here, mental health. This is, just kind of interesting to know, but we all know that the pandemic's caused us social isolation, and it is affecting our youth. In California, we've had 151% increase in inpatient visits for suicide ideation. This is what's so important about getting kids back to school. So I don't want to go too much in the numbers there, but just know that oftentimes it's our lower socioeconomic families that struggle even more disproportionately. And it's good that we stick together and advocate for our kids. And it's good to see that the bits and pieces are coming together that way, with schools going back to hybrid. I think Buckeye is going back as well. So that's it. I know we had a long meeting, so I don't want to go too much.
Okay, questions or comments by panelists? Not seeing any. How about from the public? Anybody in the public that have a question or comment for CETA?
I don't see any.
Excellent report. Thank you, Sita. You boiled that down pretty well, so appreciate that. So let's move on to APAC and John.
Sure. Hey, so our March meeting for APAC is scheduled for March 10th, which is next Wednesday. But at this point, it looks like we're going to cancel the meeting. There just hasn't been any other significant developments that have revealed themselves for anything that requires some additional study or some public discussion. So unless something, untowards happens in the next 2 days, we'll be sending our notification out to our mail list that our March 10th meeting will be canceled. But I will give a quick recap. Our February meeting focused on our subcommittee that's looking at the White Rock Road noise study report findings and their concerns there in the community. And we had some unfortunate Zoom interruptions. And that means that, future meetings, we're going to have to be more tightly controlled. So for the past several years, you in person or, right now virtually, we've attempted to conduct and focus on organized meetings, but also allow the opportunity for communicating among APAC members, attendees of the meeting, guests, and keep it in a sort of a conversational manner. I also thought the communication challenges that we did encounter didn't really serve our subcommittee members well, our guest, which was the Capital Southeast Connector JPA Executive Director, or the community as well as it could have. So I was a little disappointed about that, but we're going to work on straightening that out. We'll have it locked down for April. I did reach out to Director Minema and asked if his team would reply to our subcommittee's concerns in writing and volunteered to make that response public on our APAC website if it is forthcoming. Our next scheduled meeting, therefore, will be on April 14th, right before tax day. And we expect that we're going to be hearing about the announcement from the El Dorado Hills CSD about their intent to acquire 50 acres of property as part of the Creekside Village specific plan on the 200 plus acres at the south end of the El Dorado Hills Business Park. I have talked to the project applicants, and they will be modifying their plan to accommodate that 50-acre park space that the CSD is looking at. So that means they're going to have to modify their plan, probably the proposed tentative map, to accommodate the usage there for open space and for parks. And that sale to the CSD and the development of the park is sort of contingent on the project being approved through the planning process. But they do want to meet with APAC again and discuss those changes and what those impacts may be and how they intend to, make the best project they can out of what's there. And they're eager to hear the feedback from the public. Kind of anticipate that might be the topic of our April meeting. And if not April, it would definitely probably be in May because they're very eager. They just thought March might be a little too soon to get in front of it. So the only other item really of significance for APAC right now is that we had a very good suggestion from a community member who's volunteering for multiple subcommittees. Thank you. So with that suggestion, Tim White and I are looking at exploring the creation of a project review guide for participating APAC members, whether you're a brand new member, just working on a project, or if you've been in APAC for a long time. A lot of the questions about volunteering always center on, how do I start? What am I looking at? What am I looking for? And we've roughly sort of guided folks to where their interest is at, because that garners participation. But we also do want to provide a little bit of guidance. When a project comes along, it can't be just that I don't like this project or I love this project. It's got to be based off of what's we're have in front of us to review, and typically it's the environmental documents when we start. So hopefully Tim and I will get a good idea of what we're looking at and try to have a basic guide, which doesn't mean that APAC members will be locked into looking at reviews in one specific way, but it will be sort of a guide to focus our efforts as basically non-expert volunteers. So with that, we'll look forward to seeing everybody in April. And if anybody wants to volunteer on a project to review, there's a bunch of them coming up south of Latrobe, or south on Latrobe, and look forward to seeing everybody.
Very good. Questions or comments for John relative to APAC's activities? Not seeing any from the panel. Any public comments or questions? Not seeing any there either. So John, I'll just comment that I do have a meeting scheduled tomorrow to meet via Zoom with Derek Minema and have some discussions about what I guess the planned response is to the requests and stuff. So I should have better information to share with you and John Rasler following that meeting. So we are very close to having, I think, some additional information we can share on what their response will be. I just don't know what it is at this point.
Yeah, he was very receptive to, how I apologize for how the meeting went with our interruptions and sort of the tone of the meeting and how our technological challenges sort of didn't serve us well. So, but he's always been very engaged with us when we ask him for information or questions. So look forward to hearing back from him.
Very good. So with that, let's move on to community information and outreach. A busy topic with all the stuff to try to share. Right?
Well, a lot of this stuff, a lot of people have gone over. One thing that we recently just posted, it was from the insurance commissioner, Ricardo Lara. He's proposed some new rules to give homeowners and businesses access to their wildfire risk scores, and also how to improve them, because there's been so much problem with people losing their insurance. So now this is another path. He's trying to help people and businesses towards how they can help themselves to keep their insurance and what they can do to hopefully lower their insurance. And then the majority of the information we've been giving out is COVID related, of course. CETA put together a great piece that we put out. It gave really good information on vaccine updates, depending on which insurance you had. So that was very helpful. We've got a lot of positive feedback from that. Also, that with the county as part of the My Turn, you can sign up for the COVID vaccine registration, which has been helpful. And we also had put out the information for seniors, because a lot of the seniors, either they don't have internet or they don't know how to use it. I've had to help people sign up. So we do have phone numbers or people that they can call to help walk them through the registration process. So that's the majority of it right there.
Any questions or comments for Cindy?
Oh, Cindy, thanks that was awesome. Thank you. And I wanted to pitch in one little thing there is that some seniors are having trouble with, if they don't have a current Medicare number, they're using like their primary insurance card, say it's Kaiser or Blue Shield. And in 2015, Congress got rid of Medicare and said outlawed Medicare numbers having your social security number on it. Yeah. That's for identity theft reasons. Yeah. So if people didn't capture that they got a new card in the mail, they might not be able to sign up for the vaccine easily. They have to contact Medicare to get their number. And that was all phased in by 2019. So a few seniors were not sure why their Medicare number wasn't working. So they need to contact their local office.
Oh, that's good to know.
Very good. So I'm not seeing any other questions or comments.
I don't think so.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the council member items. First of all, is there any go backs, anything anybody forgot that's really urgent to bring up at this point? Not seeing anything from our panelists. So just want to make sure everybody knows to mark your calendar. Our next meeting is Monday, April the 5th. We do have a confirmation that Assemblyman Kevin Kiley will be our guest speaker. And he'll not only discuss the lawsuit against the governor, but there's a lot of other legislation he's proposing right now. I happen to get his newsletter. I'm sure a lot of you also get it, but there's some new legislation he's pushing really hard on. So he's definitely been very active, very visible down at the state capitol. I'm sure he's not creating as many friends as he has enemies, but he's doing the work of the people. So I appreciate that. And so we'll get a chance to hear from Kevin and understand what we can possibly do to support him in those efforts at our April 5th meeting. So looking forward to that. And then we have actually planned the next meeting as well, but I'm not going to discuss that till we get to the next meeting. We have a guest speaker already lined up that I think is also going to be able to respond to a lot of the questions about trash pickup and some of those things. So it's our Director of Environmental Management. So he's going to be able to discuss some of the changes that are going on there and some of the things that he has to deal with because of new legislation. And I think it'll all give us a better appreciation for how difficult his job is and some of the things he's doing to try to meet the demands, the needs that we have in the community. So we'll look forward to that as well. With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. We went a little bit later than nominal, but I think it was all very good discussion. And again, I appreciate Commander Hatfield's participation. We had quite a bit of discussion with him, and I think that was all fruitful. And people who choose to watch a video as a follow-on to this, if they only listen to that segment, hopefully they get some takeaways that will help them be more informed of who you report, how you report, the fact that they're here to help, but they, like any agency, they have their limitations. They don't have as many staff as ultimately they'd like to have, but they do the best within the resources they have. So again, with that, thank you all for attending. Thank you for your patience in getting through this, and have a great week and the rest of the month till we see you on April 5th.
Bye.